Hi and assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we will be continuing with biological molecules and we will be starting with carbohydrates. Now what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are compounds of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen in which hydrogen and oxygen are in the ratio of 2:1. Okay, so this thing tells me that for something to be a carbohydrate, it needs to have, first of all, only these three elements and not any other element. And secondly, the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen should be 2:1. Now, this also suggests that we do not have a fixed ratio of carbon to oxygen or carbon to hydrogen for carbohydrates. We have different relationships of carbon with hydrogen and oxygen in different carbohydrates, as we will see later on. Okay, now let's start with the first type of carbohydrates, which are monosaccharides. Monosaccharides, okay, this term suggests mono is one and saccharide refers to sugar unit. So that means one sugar. Okay, so simple sugar. Okay, they are also called simple sugars, and the general formula for monosaccharides is CnH2nOn, where n can be any integer from 3 to 6 inclusive. Okay, now this is an important thing. The general formula for all carbohydrates, as I was stating earlier, we do not have a fixed relationship of carbon with hydrogen or oxygen. However, interestingly, in monosaccharides, we have actually a relationship of carbon with hydrogen as well as oxygen. Let's write that up. Relationship in monosaccharides, the ratio of carbon to hydrogen should be 1:2, and the ratio of carbon to oxygen should be 1:1. This thing only works for monosaccharides. As we see here, the general formula for any carbohydrate is this. Although we have a relationship of hydrogen with oxygen, that's the identifying factor of a carbohydrate, that is 2:1, we do not have any relationship of carbon, any fixed relationship of carbon with hydrogen or oxygen. So here we can have X equals to Y in some cases, but for example in monosaccharides we have this case, and we also have X not equal to Y in some cases. Okay, for example polysaccharides or disaccharides. Okay, now for monosaccharides, okay, what are their properties? They are not further hydrolyzed. Hydrolyzed means to break down with the use of water. That means monosaccharides cannot be broken down. Okay, that's why they are called simple sugars. That means not further broken down. Okay, they are named by adding O's on the suffix. And moreover, the chemistry definition can be that they are polyhydroxyl groups. Polyhydroxyl means many OHs. Okay, we have many OH groups attached, and groups of carbon having aldehyde or ketone as the main group. Now what's the aldehyde and ketone? Okay, the general formula for aldehyde is this. We have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen, we have a terminal hydrogen, and we have an R group. Okay, this is the formula for an aldehyde, and the formula for a ketone is, so we have a carbon oxygen double bond, and on both sides we have R groups. This is the formula for a ketone. This is for ketone and this is for an aldehyde. Okay, Now let us go over some examples of monosaccharides. Let's take N as 3. The formula becomes C3H6O3 and we call them triose. And one example of triose can be glyceraldehyde. Okay, let's take N as 4. The formula becomes C4H8O4 and we call them tetrose accordingly. And one example can be erythrulose. Let's take N as 5. The formula becomes C5H10O5 and we call them pentose. And examples of pentose can be ribose and ribulose. Okay, now let's take N as 6. The formula becomes C6H12O6. This is the thing we are familiar with the most. And we call them hexose. And the examples can be glucose, fructose, and galactose. Okay, and we will study them later on. Okay, so let's move on to the first monosaccharide, which is glucose. Now, glucose is an aldose sugar. Okay, this means that it has an aldehyde functional group, and let's locate that functional group. Okay, so that functional group is here. We have the carbon oxygen double bond, then we have the terminal hydrogen, and then this whole thing is considered an R group. Okay, that's how it's an aldehyde. Okay, now this is the open chain structure. This whole thing is the open chain structure of glucose, and it is very important, and you need to learn this for exams, because they can ask you to draw this. They can ask you in MCQs. Okay, this is important. Now let's make a ring structure out of this open chain structure. Now what happens is, okay, actually there is an intramolecular nucleophilic addition reaction, okay, between the aldehyde group at carbon 1, this is the carbon 1, and the hydroxyl group. This is the hydroxyl group at carbon 5. Okay, we have an intramolecular nucleophilic addition reaction. We do not have to go in detail for that because that's not in the syllabus. We are just supposed to know that there's an oxygen bridge formed between the carbon 1 and the carbon 5. Okay, why we call this an oxygen bridge? This is because we are using oxygen to bridge the gap between carbon 1 and carbon 5. Now and after this process, what happens is this double bond is non-existent. We have an OH group attached to the first carbon, and this thing is also non-existent. And this is okay. This, now let's display this as a ring structure. Now you may notice that I have made 2 rings here, and I'll get to that in a bit. Now let's start with the carbons. Okay, I've drawn 6 carbons accordingly. This is the oxygen of the oxygen bridge. Similarly here. Now let's start with placing these groups. Okay, now if you notice it's carbon 2. Okay, the first rule of this is that everything on the right of the chain structure, this thing, okay, will come below the ring, and everything on the left side, this thing, will come above the ring. Okay, except for this carbon 6 and its groups, and this, the carbon 1 having this hydroxyl group and this H hydrogen. We'll come to that in a bit. Okay, let's place these. Now in carbon 2, you may notice we have an OH on the right side. That means we'll have an OH in the ring structure below the ring. Similarly here as well. Similarly in carbon 3, we have this in the left side. Let's make that above the ring, and here also above the ring. The 4th carbon, we have this in the right side. let's make that below the ring, and similarly here below the ring. Okay, let's move on to carbon 6. We have CH2OH. Okay, carbon 6 is always placed above the ring, CH2OH, and here also CH2OH. Now this OH group and this hydrogen uh, uh, can interchange. Okay, the OH can be above the ring and OH can also be below the ring. Now when OH is below the ring, okay, let's make that we have the OH below the ring. Okay, keep in mind that I'm not showing the hydrogens. Okay, we have hydrogens here. Yes, we have hydrogens here. Okay, but I'm not showing them because it's obvious. Okay, let's do. Okay, now we were here. Okay, we have OH below this ring in carbon 1. Now this thing, we give that a special name and it's called alpha glucose ring structure, right? And we have here when it's above the ring, then we call this obviously a beta glucose, alpha beta. Okay, so these are the two ring structures of this open chain structure. And yeah, that's it for today. Okay, thank you for listening. We'll meet in the next video. Till then, take care.